Hello everyone, and welcome back to Isaiah for Mormons. Today, we're going to be doing Isaiah 41. This is just part of that same speech we've been doing for quite some time. And it actually just flows right on through. It makes a lot of logical sense going from 40 into 41 and then into the beginning of 42. So, just to kind of remind you of this speech, this is, like I've said before, kind of like Isaiah's St. Crispin's Day speech. This is right before the Assyrian siege of Jerusalem, probably. And so in the end of 40, he says, Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary? There is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that hath no might he increaseth strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles, they shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. And so then this one starts, Keep silence before me, O islands, and let the people renew their strength. He's just running with the same idea. So we can see that he's trying to get them to be okay with what's going on, to not be afraid. Obviously, this is a huge calamity, really, that's falling upon Judah right now. But Isaiah is trying to get them to realize that everything is going to be okay. So that's really what we're seeing in this chapter. So let's just dive right in and talk about things. I just should mention here that I'm not going to be using the Septuagint as much anymore. The reason for that is, like I may have mentioned earlier, the problems now that we're going to get with the text, I feel like, are fairly obvious, and so we just won't need the Septuagint quite as much. And also, I want to demonstrate that you can interpret even the regular Hebrew text as being something as specifically addressing the Assyrian period. Yes, he probably alludes to future events, but mostly he's talking to his audience in the Assyrian period. Even at times when he may seem like he's not doing that, he almost certainly is. And so that's what I wanted to stress here. And the Hebrew, actually, I think emphasizes that the most. That's why I'm going to be using it here. Because I could use the Greek text, for example, and I will probably still use the Dead Sea Scrolls. People could, of course, say, well, you just used the Greek text in this part to make it seem like it's the Assyrian period, even when it isn't. Because I could just pick things from the Septuagint whenever it seems to talk about the Babylonians. But I'm not, so that's why I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just stick with the Hebrew text for the most part, except for occasions where we really need something else, and then I'll probably use the Dead Sea Scrolls, and on very rare occasions the Septuagint. But this chapter, we can figure it out well enough without helps. Like I said, I think from here on the textual corruption's a little different that's happening, and so I think it's a little easier to spot. So, chapter 41 begins. Keep silence before me, O islands, and let the people renew their strength. Let them come together, let them come near, let them speak. Let us come near together to judgment. Who raised up the righteous man from the east, called him to his foot, and gave the nations before him, and made him rule over kings? He gave them as the dust to his sword, and as driven stubble to his bow. He pursued them and passed safely, even by the way that he had not gone with his feet. Who hath wrought and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am he. The isles saw it and feared, the ends of the earth were afraid, drew near and came. They helped everyone his neighbor, and everyone said to his brother, Be of good courage. So what's happening here? I think this is him, Isaiah, reminding everyone where they come from. He says, Keep silence before me, O islands, and let the people renew their strength. Islands, there may not be islands, it may just be, like we might say, countries today, the ends of the earth. So everyone, be silent, and let the people renew their strength. Let them come near, then let them speak. Let us come near together to judgment. So he says all the people will renew their strength, and the islands will be silent. They will not do anything while the people are renewing their strength. I think that's the idea. He's holding the whole world at bay to not come and attack Judah, so Judah can take a few breaths here and renew its strength. So then he says, let them come near. Then let them speak. He's having them all just kind of orderly, or almost line up in an orderly fashion and come and speak to them. And let us come near together to judgment. He says, everybody come here and let's speak in an orderly fashion as though you were in court bringing your case. Let us come near together to judgment. So it's kind of this odd and hilarious thing where you have all this sort of chaos going on, but he says, nope, we're all going to line up now and we're going to talk about judgment. All the nations are going to be judged. So then he says, who raised up the righteous man from the east and called him to his foot and gave the nations before him and made him rule over kings? So who is this? Presumably this is Abraham. So who raised up Abraham, the righteous man from literally the east, down in Ur, down in Iraq, and called him to his foot, or presumably called him, it could be called him to come. That's based on other things we get later. That may be the implication. Called him to get up and go, gave the nations to him, and made him rule over kings. Because you remember that occasion where Abraham in Genesis is literally fighting and beating some of the major rulers in the area with his little motley band of adventurers going through and saving Lot. You may remember that story. It's around Genesis 14. So Abraham is doing all these great things. He says he gave them as the dust to his sword and as driven stubble to his bow. And Abraham specifically talks about that. This area I've taken with my sword and with my bow. And we actually do get that, right? Abraham appears to, in the course of reacquiring Lot, of getting him back, he appears to carve out a small area for himself. He said he pursued them and passed safely, even by the way that he had not gone with his feet. So in other words, he is pursuing his enemies, but he was safe, even though he had not even been there before. He had not been to the Holy Land before. God told him, I need you to move to Canaan. So he'd never even lived there before, but God had made him safe. And so God says, who's done all this? Who hath wrought and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? He says, I have. I, the Lord, the first and with the last, I am he. He says, I'm the one that has done this. He says, calling the generations from the beginning. This is probably him organizing all the generations from the very beginning and distinguishing their names and where they're going to live. He says, I, the Lord, I was the one at the beginning that made even the first man. So I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am he. Why does he say and with the last? Because he's the one that made man in the first place, but he will also be there at the end of the world too. He said, the isles saw it and feared. Once again, this is probably just the countries. All the countries saw this and feared. The ends of the earth were afraid, drew near, and came. They helped everyone. So all the ends of the earth have seen this. They were afraid of what these people could do. So they all came and attacked. And it says, they helped everyone his neighbor, and everyone said to his brother, be of good courage. So all these countries are coming in to attack Israel and Judah that God has established. And they're all saying, yeah, be of good courage, don't worry about it. But God supports them. So he says, so the carpenter encouraged the goldsmith, and he that smootheth with the hammer him that smote the anvil, saying, it is ready for the soldering. And he fastened it with the nails, that it should not be moved. So the people are coming to attack Israel, and everyone else is saying, oh, this is no problem. We'll come and take him out. And the carpenter, it says the carpenter encouraged the goldsmith. So the carpenter is conferring with the goldsmith. Presumably this is talking about making an idol. The carpenter would make it out of wood. The goldsmith would lay it over with gold. And he that smootheth with the hammer, him that smote with the anvil. So that all these people are working together. They kind of smooth it down with a little hammer, the gold over the wooden idol. It says, him that smote with the anvil, maybe doing work bending the gold itself over an anvil, saying, "It is ready for the soldering," and he fastened it with nails that it should not be moved. So these people have got this idol. Presumably they're actually taking it into battle with them. They're nailing it down onto this thing so they can bring it into battle with them. This kind of ridiculous image of these people taking this idol, thinking it's going to help them against Abraham, even though the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is helping them. So then God kind of makes fun of this and says, "But thou, Israel, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend." So these people all thought they were going to be able to take out Abraham, but they weren't able to. And in much the same way, you, Israel, are going to be preserved. He said, "Thou whom I have taken from the ends of the earth, and called thee from the chief men thereof, and said unto thee, Thou art my servant. I have chosen thee, and not cast thee away." So he says, I've chosen you guys. I'm here to take care of you guys. So these guys think that their idols are going to help them beat you, but it's not going to happen. I've brought you from the ends of the earth, really, via Abraham, and also even the wives of the patriarchs who were from kind of far away, says, I'm bringing you all here, and I'm going to take care of you now. So he says, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Behold, all they who were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing, and they that strive with thee shall perish." So he says, don't be afraid. I'm with you. You'll recognize this from How Firm a Foundation. This is pretty similar language. "Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness." God, in other words, is going to help them now against the Assyrians, just as he helped Abraham from all the neighbors that may have wanted to do him harm back in the day. He says, "Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. All those that are angry at you are going to come to naught. They shall be as nothing. They that strive with thee shall perish." You're not going to have to worry about these guys at all, in other words. "Thou shalt seek them, and shalt not find them, even them that contended with thee. They that war against thee shall be as nothing, and as a thing of naught. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee. Fear not, thou worm Jacob, ye men of Israel, I will help thee, saith the Lord, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. Behold, I will make thee a new sharp threshing instrument, having teeth. Thou shalt thresh the mountains, and beat them small, and make the hills as chaff. Thou shalt fan them, and the wind shall carry them away, and the whirlwind shall scatter them, and thou shalt rejoice in the Lord, and shalt glory in the Holy One of Israel." This is quite the promise. He says, "Thou shalt seek them, and shalt not find them." You will even if you went out to look for your enemies, you won't be able to find them, those that were contending with you. "They that war against thee shall be as nothing, as a thing of naught." I'm going to obliterate these people, in other words. "For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee." I like the idea of holding thy right hand. And it could even be this idea of him holding their right hand with their sword in it, basically just fighting for them and saying, "Fear not, I will help thee." It could also be taking them by the right hand and guiding them, which is interesting because that's the sword hand. So it could also be this idea of, you won't even need to use your sword hand at all. I'm going to fight for you. It's thus holding thy right hand, saying, "Fear not, I will help thee." Now there are, of course, other significant things in our liturgy having to do with God holding your right hand, and there may be something to that as well here. It says, "Fear not, thou worm Jacob, ye men of Israel, I will help thee, saith the Lord, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel." So he says, "Fear, don't be afraid." He says, "Thou worm Jacob." This is kind of funny, but worm may not be a great translation there. It may be more like, you just regular mortal Jacob, and ye men of Israel. So don't be afraid, even though you're just mortal men. I will help thee, saith the Lord, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. So Jehovah is going to, as he says, he's reminding them, he's their Redeemer. He's going to bring them out of bondage, as it were, redeem them from their enemies, but also there's some connotation here sometimes of slavery almost. So this word redeemer, this can be redeemer, but it can also be avenger. So I will help thee, saith the Lord, and thy avenger, the Holy One of Israel. That all kind of makes sense together. He's going to avenge them of their enemies, and he's reminding them here that he is the Holy One of Israel, the one who is better than all the other gods, and many implications of this. Many times this implies militarily he's better than all the other gods. He says, behold, I will make thee a new sharp threshing instrument, having teeth. So you may remember from before, but when you thresh wheat, you harvest it, and then you put it on the ground, and then you have this board with these teeth in it that you sometimes even just nails, you've kind of nailed through it. And it has these sharp teeth, and then you put the board over the top of the grain with all the straw and all the chaff on the grain. And this threshing instrument helps to kind of tear the grain, kind of pull the grain out from the chaff and the straw. It helps to separate it. So he says, this is a very kind of violent imagery he's depicting here. So he says, I'm going to make you like that. Thou shalt thresh the mountains and beat them small, and make the hills as chaff. So all of these Assyrians who were lined up on the mountains surrounding Jerusalem, they're going to be completely obliterated like chaff. It says, thou shalt fan them, and the wind shall carry them away, and the whirlwind shall scatter them. And thou shalt rejoice in the Lord, and shalt glory in the Holy One of Israel. So here it continues the image, because that's what you do. You run this sort of sledge with teeth over it, and the chaff separates from the wheat, the little straw bits. Then you fan it, and with that fan, the air pushes the chaff away, and then the wind just blows it all away. So he says it's going to be just like that. God's going to scatter them like wind scatters chaff. And then you will rejoice in the Lord, who is, by the way, the best war god, makes Ashur look like a silly little baby. I am Jehovah. I'm going to take care of the Assyrians for you. 17. When the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue faileth for thirst, I, the Lord, will hear them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will open rivers in high places, and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. I will plant in the wilderness the cedar, the shittah tree, and the myrtle, and the oil tree. I will set in the desert the fir tree, and the pine, and the box tree together, that they may see and know and consider and understand together that the hand of the Lord hath done this, and the Holy One of Israel hath created it. Produce your cause, saith the Lord. Bring forth your strong reasons, saith the King of Jacob. Let them bring them forth, and show us what shall happen. Let them show the former things what they be, that we may consider them, and know the latter end of them, or declare us things for to come. So you can imagine during a siege, water's the thing that goes first. So he says, when the poor and needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue faileth for thirst, I, the Lord, will hear them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. So presumably, like I said, that fountain does appear to have been put in place. The new tunnel and pool that he digs appears to have been put in place also to support the poor. But it's possible that even during part of this period, there was not enough for everybody. So it says, when these people want water and there isn't any, their tongues are failing for thirst in this siege. It says, I, the Lord, will hear them, and I will not forsake them. And then he says, something we've seen before. There wasn't even really much of an allusion to this in what we read in the actual narrative portion talking about the siege. But there's continued implications that God brought a big storm down, which would have been great for the defenders in Jerusalem, because it's going to put more water into the cisterns, the big water tanks they've hewn out of the rocks underneath Jerusalem, and also help to refill that pool. Also, if it was a bad enough storm, it could cause flash flooding in that area around Jerusalem and wash away some of the Assyrian siege works and towers. So a storm would have been just the thing. And would have been seen certainly as a divine aid, because Jehovah was seen in the Psalms and other times as a weather god, a god that controls the elements. So he says, I will open rivers in high places and fountains in the midst of the valleys. So he's saying you're going to have rivers of water flowing down the mountains, and it's going to be like fountains in the middle of these valleys. You're going to have big streams running through these formerly dry valleys. So I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. So these areas like steppe country is wilderness. I might translate it as steppe country, or not quite desert. And then in the dry land, springs of water. So he's going to cause so much rain that there's going to be water everywhere. He says, I will plant in the wilderness the cedar, the shittah tree, and the myrtle, and the oil tree. I will set in the desert the fir tree, and the pine, and the box tree together. All these luxurious trees, you would have enough water to grow those things, even in the desolate wilderness that's right next to Jerusalem. It's coming up from the coast. I may have mentioned this before. Coming up from the coast, it's all pretty green until you hit the Jerusalem area, and then just east of Jerusalem, it drops down into this utterly barren wilderness. It's something called a rain shadow. The rain coming up from the Mediterranean can't quite make it over the hump, and so everything east of there is just totally desolate, going down to the Dead Sea. So he says even this area is going to be totally luxuriant and like a forest. That's how much water I'm going to bring in for you guys so you can survive the siege. And he says, I'm going to do this to prove to everyone what I've done. He says, that they may see and know and consider and understand together that the hand of the Lord hath done this, the Holy One of Israel hath created it. I'm going to put all these trees growing in the wilderness so everyone will know that I'm the one that has supported you. So that's Isaiah's kind of figurative and flowery language, basically saying, I'm going to support you. Literally and figuratively, I'm going to support you through this siege. And everyone is going to know that I did it. So then he says, produce your cause, saith the Lord. Bring forth your strong reasons, saith the King of Jacob. Let them bring them forth and show us what shall happen. Let them show the former things what they be, that we may consider them and know the latter end of them, or declare us things for to come. So he says, I'm telling you right now exactly what's going to happen. But these idols he's been talking about earlier, he's bringing everyone together for a trial, remember? And he says, okay, now you guys go. Bring forth your side of the argument. Show us what's going to happen. Let's see if your idols can call exactly what's going to happen with this siege. Declare to us things to come. Isaiah can do it because God knows exactly what's going to happen and is telling Isaiah. But these other people can't do it. These other idols can't deliver. He says, show the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that ye are gods. If you're really gods, you'll be able to tell us what's going to happen in the future. Yea, do good or do evil, that we may be dismayed and behold it together. He says, tell me what's going to happen in the future. Or really do anything. Do good or do evil. So that we can see. And obviously, they can't do that because they're completely powerless. So then he continues, behold, ye are of nothing, and your work of naught. An abomination is he that chooseth you. I have raised up one from the north, and he shall come. From the rising of the sun shall he call upon my name. And he shall come upon princes, as upon mortar, and as the potter treadeth clay. Who hath declared from the beginning, that we may know, and before time that we may say he is righteous? There is none that showeth, yea, there is none that declareth, yea, there is none that heareth your words. The first shall say to Zion, behold them, and I will give to Jerusalem one that bringeth good tidings. For I beheld, and there was no man, even among them, and there was no counselor, that when I asked of them, could answer a word. He says, you idols are literally worthless. You are of nothing, and your work of naught. So, once again, he's ratcheting up the rhetoric here. Ashur is not as good as Jehovah. This is not a tie. Ashur did not fight Jehovah to a standstill. The god of the Assyrians, Ashur, did not fight Jehovah to a standstill. You guys are nothing. You can't do anything. And anybody that chooses you is an abomination, and by implication, an idiot. Why would you worship a god that can't do anything? So he says, I've raised up one from the north, and he shall come. From the rising of the sun shall he call upon my name. And he shall come upon princes as upon mortar, and as the potter treadeth clay. So, in other words, he's saying, who do you think has really made all this happen? I'm the one who's called in the Assyrians. I've raised up one from the north. Remember, the Assyrians are kind of east, but they have to go north and then come down into Jerusalem. So he's raised him up from the north, and he shall come. From the rising of the sun shall he call upon my name, and he shall come upon princes as upon mortar, and as the potter treadeth clay. So here I just have to mention one small textual variant from the Dead Sea Scrolls. It should probably be, you have raised up one from the north, and he shall come. From the rising of the sun shall he call upon my name, or call upon your name, and he shall come upon princes as upon mortar, and as the potter treadeth clay. So he says, in other words, who possibly would ever worship idols? Okay, fine, you have raised up one from the north, and he shall come. From the rising of the sun, he takes on your name. So this is the king of Assyria. The idols have raised up this king of Assyria. He's coming from the north. He's coming, and from the rising of the sun from the east, because he's actually from the east, but he has to go east and then come down, up and around from the north. It says he's being called by your name, probably what it should be in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he says, and he shall come upon princes as upon mortar, and as the potter treadeth clay. So yes, you guys have brought up the idols, have brought up the king of Assyria, and he's coming. He's from the east, and he's coming up down from the north, because that's, like I said, that's what you have to do, coming into Jerusalem. And he's going to trample these people. But who ever mentioned this? Who said that this was going to happen before it happened? Who hath declared from the beginning that we may know, and before time that we may say he is righteous? Yea, there is none that showeth, yea, there is none that declareth, there's none that heareth your words. So Isaiah says, I totally am calling exactly what's going to happen. Do you guys have anybody that said that the king of Assyria was going to come and do this? No, you didn't. So then he says, the first shall say to Zion, Behold, behold them, and I will give to Jerusalem one that bringeth good tidings. It says, you guys have no idea what's going to happen. But, he says, the first, this is presumably messengers. I'm going to send messengers, and they'll say to Zion, look at what's happening. I'm giving to Jerusalem one that bringeth good tidings. So you guys have no idea what's going to happen beforehand. But I, the first, presumably this is himself actually, I know exactly what's going to happen. See those guys? They're not going to be able to do anything. So he is literally the one bringing good tidings to Jerusalem. For I beheld, and there was no man even among them, and there was no counselor that when I asked of them could answer a word. Well, they are all vanity, their works are nothing, their molten images are wind and confusion. So he says, I absolutely know what's going to happen. I've been telling you what's going to happen. I've been bringing good tidings to Zion. I've been telling Zion everything's going to be okay. But when I looked at you guys, the Assyrians, there was nobody that ever called any of this in advance. Nobody knew what was going to happen. I asked. They didn't know. This is probably him metaphorically asking. I don't think he even speaks the language, although he maybe does. Maybe he's educated enough that he speaks Aramaic. But anyway, he's probably not literally asking. But this is him figuratively saying nobody had any idea what was going on. Why? Because they are all vanity. The idols are nothing. Their works are nothing. Their molten images, that's specifically the idols, molten out of metal, are wind and confusion. In other words, completely worthless and nothing. So, what do we get in this chapter? I think we get the idea that God knows everything. He knows exactly what's going to happen, and he's calling exactly what's going to happen in advance. The idols have no idea because they're worthless. So he's showing the contrast that God, in the past, called up Abraham to do great things. And he supported Abraham and allowed him to become great. And in the same way, God is going to support Jerusalem. He's going to save Jerusalem from the Assyrians. So I think that's really what we see here in this speech. So this is almost the end of the speech. I think probably the middle of 42. A couple verses into 42 is the end of the speech. But it's a little bit hard to tell, honestly, but that appears to be the case. So, just to close, I'd just like to, as I often do, kind of relate it to today. What does this have to do with today? We aren't being besieged by the Assyrians. Well, no, we aren't. But I think we all have times when we have to say to ourselves, God helped people that came before me. He's going to help me too. If God was able to get Abraham out of the problems that he found himself in, surely God will help us as we struggle through the problems that we have today. And from our perspective, God helped these guys too. If God helped Abraham, if God sent a bunch of mice and plague on 185,000 Assyrians to help Jerusalem at this point, isn't God going to help us too? And I think, yeah, absolutely He is. All we have to do is not put our trust in things that are worthless. We just have to put our trust in God, and He'll come through for us. So anyway, that's it for 41. Like I said, we're just going to do a little bit into 42. We will probably talk about Zoroastrianism at some point pretty soon here, maybe in just a few sections, to explain some of the things that we brought up in these last few chapters. But anyway, that's it for now, and we will see you guys next time.